Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is full of twists, turns, and world-changing events even before reaching the final act, so it trusts that you've been paying full attention well before the final battle. It's a story that often deals in subtleties, with characters withholding information or struggling with their own feelings in critical moments, sometimes not even knowing the truth themselves. So the story may be hard to parse at times, but that's where we come in. Here, we're explaining the ending to Clair Obscur Expedition 33, so major spoilers ahead. First, let's establish a few critical points leading up to the tough decision you must make at the very end, just to make sure we're on the same page. Despite most of the game being about expeditions, the story actually centers around the Dessendre family: Renoir the father, Aline the mother, Clea the eldest daughter, Verso the middle son, and Alicia the youngest daughter, and they have the power to create fictional worlds through painting. The family was devastated by a fire, however, and that took the life of Verso, who saved Alicia. In that tragedy, she suffered permanent injuries, full body scars, losing an eye, and losing her ability to speak. Now the whole game takes place in a painting, specifically Verso's canvas, which is a fantasy world separate from reality. This is where we find Lumiere. The paintress is an avatar of Aline and was actually not killing off the people of Lumiere and instead marking the ages on the monolith as a warning sign. She had been trapped in the monolith to limit her power and her ability to keep the people of Lumiere alive, who are her painted creations. The Verso you control is a painted version who's been injected with the memories of the Verso long gone, and Maelle is a painted version of Alicia, an idealized version of herself. Alicia and Aline have been using Verso's canvas as a way to cope with his death and keep his memory alive, but through this false version of him. The initial antagonist version of Renoir is a painted version, who was created to protect the paintress from the expeditions, while Verso had been aiding the expeditions since they began.
I've never seen you before.
First expedition. Expedition 0.
The Curator is an avatar for the real Renoir and assists you since his ultimate goal is to take down the paintress because he believes that destroying the canvas is the only way to get the family back to reality. But of course, you don't know this until you get to the final act. He does not trust Maelle/Alicia to use the canvas in a healthy way, as Maelle eventually sees the canvas as a life she wants, and she'll save it at all costs.
Do you really think that I want to destroy this last piece of his soul?
Don't.
With that established, we're going to start at the final boss. Upon defeating the Curator/real Renoir, he makes one last plea to Maelle to leave the painting behind and return to real life.
Put aside the canvas. Here you go.
Renoir creates a rift between the canvas and reality to show how much Aline has been suffering and grieving through it all, and saying that she and Alicia have been essentially living ghosts, detached from all reality. Aline refuses to let go of Verso's canvas. After all, she is the paintress who brought many of the pieces of that canvas to life. She simply cannot function in the real world, however, and Renoir states how tired he is of watching the family fall apart and lose themselves to the painting.
I cannot spend another day with living corpses. Since the fire, our family has crumbled.
Since he is defeated, he has no choice but to concede to Maelle and extends an olive branch saying, "I'll keep the light on for you," hoping that one day she will leave the canvas and come back to reality. Meanwhile, Verso's thoughts and feelings become increasingly conflicted, having peered into a window of his mom's life, and he begins to understand the true motivations of both Renoir and Maelle. He hastily steps through a rift that brings him into a sort of limbo between the canvas and the real world, where he finds the faceless young boy, who you've encountered throughout the game, painting on the ground. Verso approaches him and asks him,
You're tired of painting, aren't you? I'm tired too.
Maelle follows Verso into the rift, and she and Verso start to clash. Verso begins adopting the ideals of Renoir, knowing that he is just an approximation of a dead brother and son. Knowing the pain it has caused the family, he wishes them to move on rather than live in a false reality because of him. Maelle pleads with him to stay in the canvas and believes Renoir will destroy it as soon as she leaves anyway. She says,
"Everything I want is here. Here I have a chance to live, Verso, to live. Out there I really exist."
They're at an impasse, and so they must fight to determine who decides fate.
next life.
Siding with Maelle means fighting against Verso, and upon defeating him, he begs Maelle not to follow through with keeping the painted world alive as he fades away.
I don't want this life.
He knows Maelle will bring him back and subject him to a false life while knowing it's what's keeping her from facing reality, and so he wishes for death, uttering,
Help me.
The final cutscene takes you back to Lumiere, where you can see a crowd outside the opera house, and with Esquier and Minoko being the bouncer and usher for an event inside, and you can see Esquier slap his own belly and it jiggles. Oh, it's so cute. Maelle walks in with a young boy who might be a young Verso or the painting boy made manifest. Either way, they see Ciel with her husband and Lune saving their seats for them. Gustave and Sophie show up and sit next to them too, and Gustave embraces Maelle. It seems like everything is fine and everyone can live happily ever after since she was able to bring back as many as she could. The lights shut and the show begins in a black and white and 4:3 aspect ratio. An aging Verso takes the stage and he slowly and reluctantly approaches a piano. You can clearly see the disdain and contempt on his face, essentially playing puppet for Maelle in this fake world. The scene is unsettling and shot like a horror film. The camera cuts back and forth between an angry Verso and a tense Maelle, signifying they both know this isn't right. A discordant piano chord hits, Maelle's face is shown with the deterioration of someone losing themselves to the canvas like her mother Aline. Verso begins the concert and credits roll. Now going back to the decision you must make, siding with Verso means fighting against Maelle, but by no means is this a, quote, better ending, even though it may be the right thing to do.
Don't do this. Don't leave me again.
Don't leave me again, the fading Maelle pleads as Verso assures her that things will be okay, reminding her of her power to paint in the real world. After Maelle is gone, Esquier and Minoko cross the rift to say goodbye to their longtime friend, the manifestations of Verso's stuffed toy and beloved dog. They group hug Verso and he tells them he'll miss them before they fade away. Ciel acknowledges his choice and understands as she approaches Verso to touch him one last time as she fades. An angry Lune stares daggers back at Verso and sits in front of the rift in defiance as she fades, still burnt by how he hid his motivations and lied to the group. Verso takes the faceless boy's hand, telling him he can rest now, and acknowledges that boy as Verso, confirming the boy's identity and fading away themselves. Verso's soul can now rest for good, but at the cost of everything that had existed in his canvas. You then see the family at their manor in reality afterward, overlooking the Eiffel Tower and gathering at Verso's grave in the yard to finally mourn him together. Renoir is holding a crying Aline, Clea stands alone and sets flowers down on the grave, while Alicia stares blankly forward, holding Verso's old Esquier plushie. She sees the ghosts of everyone from the expedition one last time as they all wave goodbye, putting a final stamp on the world of Verso's canvas. Clair Obscur is powerful in that it shows that dealing with tragedy and grief doesn't have a happy ending. A death in the family is always painful, but it can sometimes tear families apart in unpredictable ways, changing who people are and their relationships with each other permanently. Where Maelle/Alicia loses herself to a fictional world that has everything she loves to replace the life she no longer wants in the real world, it's still a happiness built on a fleeting fantasy. Verso forces his family to move on from his real-world death, but has to erase everything painted in his canvas, including himself, because of the damage it has caused. The friends he made along the way, the lives that they had in that fictional world, and the comfort it gave his sister and mother. It's implied that so long as Maelle is in the canvas, Renoir won't destroy it, but once she's out, he'll get rid of it for good, having seen what it has done to both Aline and Alicia, and having experienced losing himself to a canvas in the past. Clair Obscur shows how fiction has the potential to heal us, and the characters within that fiction can be just as important in shaping our lives as real people. But to deny your reality to solely live in that fiction, no matter how comforting it might be, it's dangerous. No matter whose side you're taking in the end, you're denying someone the agency of choosing the life that they want, and I suppose that's a conflict we feel in situations such as this, especially for those who've experienced rifts between loved ones. No one comes out unscathed in the face of tragedy, and it's a reality many of us, unfortunately, have to face. If Sandfall's goal was to leave us conflicted regardless of the choice we made, and have us lost in thought well after we put down the controller, I'd say they did an incredible job.
If you could grow old, would you find a reason to smile?
Are there any details you noticed in the endings, and did the story hit you in your feelings? Let us know in the comments. If you want more on 2025's breakout RPG hit, be sure to watch my review of Clair Obscur Expedition 33 and check out our interview with the developers on how they made one of the year's best games.